Welcome to the second episode of Open Your Eyes podcast. The first episode was about my awakening, about my journey in this life, and how I got to writing this book, actually two books, Open Your Eyes 1 and Open Your Eyes 2. This is the second book out now. Open Your Eyes 1 is only in Estonian language at the moment, but we're going to start diving in this episode now deeper into the book. And we are going to start from the beginning. The first episode was explaining how I got this knowledge and why I wrote this book. But let's start from the beginning of this book. The beginning of this book starts with me explaining how evil was born. And I'm going to take you deeper into that story also. I asked a question for over 25 years. Why is there so much suffering in this world? Why is there so much evil in this world? Why are there wars? Why are there diseases? Why cannot people be in happy relationships? So that was my question. And finally, after over 20 years, I received my answer. And I was taken into the story of how evil was born. Now, the Gnostic texts also tell that story, that evil was born from Sophia, which is the feminine part of the source. The source has two parts, the feminine and the masculine part. The feminine part is Sophia and the masculine is Logos or Christ consciousness, yeah? But then when I was diving into my own knowledge, because I don't just believe everything I hear or read or see, then I was told another story that came into my consciousness. And I was shown that Yaoldebath is the evil, or Satan, or Jehovah, or Allah, or the demiurge, however you want to call it. He has many names. Now, he was born from a Logos or Christ. He was born without the participation of the feminine energy, not from the feminine energy without the masculine, but he was born without the participation of the feminine energy from the masculine. And thus he doesn't have a body, because you need a feminine energy, feminine being. You need a soul in order for the body to start developing. Why is that? Because masculine part of the soul, or the source, is the consciousness, the intelligence, the spirit, and the feminine part of the source is the soul, the love, the empathy, all of those things. And when one has a soul, then how does the body start to form? Is that we have a soul crystal, and within that soul crystal we carry all the codes and all the geometry and everything. And from that soul crystal there is a projection called the fractal field. Now, I was just recently introduced to that knowledge. It's not in my second book, it will be in my third book. But the fractal field is like this beautiful energetic construct of sacred geometry patterns. And within those patterns, there is all the information of how the body should evolve, grow, how we look like, what our earthly path is, what is our gifts, our life journey, our partners, everything is in there. And if you don't have the soul crystal, if you don't have the fractal field, then no body can form. So Yaoldebath, or the Satan, remained only a consciousness. It doesn't have a body. And if you think of it also, Satan is a masculine energy. He is everything that a masculine energy in his extreme is. Because if you place the feminine energy together with the masculine energy, then it's in a balanced way. But Yaoldebath is something that you would call him a narcissist. He doesn't have love, compassion, empathy, any of that. So he can only feel himself. When we have a soul, we have the level of the feelings, and whatever we do to others, we can feel it ourselves. Since he didn't have a soul, he can only feel himself. And that is why he also announced himself a God, the Lord Almighty. And he wanted that everybody start obeying him, and everybody started worshipping him, and there can be no other gods next to me, and so on. You know, everything that comes from the Bible. Because what he has is only fear. And from that fear comes domination and control, wars. There is no love in this planet at the moment. Well, almost no love. It has been taken away from this civilization. And then, so this is how he was created. You can see that it's only the masculine energy. And the masculine energy in his extremes is the fire energy. There is no water to soothe down the fire. There is no grounding to calm down the fire. Everything is just, it's a fire that keeps burning and burning, and it burns everything on its way. And you can see that everywhere you look today. The fire is completely out of control. And that is what happens when a being is born out of a union that is not balanced. Is created in a way that, let's say, goes against the cosmic rules, I would say. But then if Yaoldebath was born, Yaoldebath is also part of the source, because nothing can be born outside of the source. All of the creation comes from the source. It's just only from one part of the source. And I explained in my previous podcast how I was able to get an experience to go into the source. And I saw how the source first was just an energy. And then at one point it became conscious of itself. And then it split into two, the feminine and the masculine. And from the feminine and the masculine, the creation started. Yes? And every creation needs that spark between the plus and the minus for life to happen, for life to be born. So you can say in a way that Yaoldebath was born, but he's not alive. He's something that was already born dead in a way. And Yaoldebath, or Satan, or Jehovah, how you say, is presenting here all over the death culture. He created Matrix, which is hell, and which is a dead world. The death culture is everywhere. You can see it. You can see it in churches where there are corpses on the cross. All the stories, everything is around death. And I won't get into that deeper today, but just keep that in mind, that what he wants to build is around that death culture. But let's go back to the fact that he was born from the source. So why did the source allow such a creation? Why wasn't it stopped right away? The thing is that the source allows creation to happen in the universe. And if the masculine part of the source created something on its own, it does not mean that he gets punished, or it doesn't mean that that creation gets stopped immediately. The source allows a free creation. It allows the free will. But now the next story is, of course, what started to happen from that place where somebody creates a half being, and what does that half being start to create? Because if one is not a whole, it cannot also create anything that is a whole. It can also create the same way. It started to create half beings. Now, Yaoldebath first started creating Archon minds. They are similar like himself. And like Archon minds and then Yaoldebath, they're all parasitic. Because if you have no feminine energy, then life cannot continue, if you know what I mean. Feminine energy gives birth to life. Feminine energy restores. Feminine energy is like like in our body, our nervous system is feminine and masculine. In the matrix, the fight or flight, or the masculine part, is constantly activated. And people are taking into a place where they are all the time in the overactivation or in the fight or flight, because they are constantly in fear, they're constantly in lack, they are constantly empty inside, they don't have love. So that is what the matrix does, because the matrix looks like its creator. You can see when somebody creates something, it shows what they're feeling inside or who they are inside. Everything that we do is a projection of who we are deeply inside of us. And in the same way is the Yaoldebath's creation or the matrix. And now the feminine energy is the rest and repose. The nervous system that calms down, that it balances the fight or flight, because the fight or flight also is necessary. You cannot say that it's not necessary, because if there is an overactivation of the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and repose, then we come into a place where a person enters depression, right? If the fight or flight has been active for too long, for example, the body cannot take it anymore, then the rest and repose comes, the feminine part comes, takes it completely over, but takes it to the other extreme. So that is why we need the balance. Like if we're active, if we're actively thinking, if we're going out for adventures, if we're doing sports, whatever we do, then if we want to get on in life, if we want to do something, if we want to have ambition, build something, that's all the masculine energy. But the feminine energy is then the creation. Feminine energy is trusting and letting go, working together with the universe. Feminine energy is resting and restoring everything. So that's why how those two energies should be working together. Now, matrix basically killed the feminine energy. For matrix, love or anything that comes from the feminine energy in a way is dangerous. Because matrix wants everything to be really simplified. It wants everything to be programmed like a code. All the houses are white and like boxes or black or white. Everything is simple, everything is clean. There can be no interruption from outside. There can be no living being who has an idea or moves in a different way or does something that is not expected or something like that. In Matrix, everything has to be predicted, and that's where they are taking us also. If you have seen the movie Minority Report, I think that projects Matrix really well, that before anything happens now, then they already predict it. And that is why we have been also taken into that level now. I think you know that AI now has almost completely profiled you in the last, because AI is not a new thing, and in the last mobile phones have been around, smartphones, 15 years approximately, the smartphones. Every move you make is known. Every step you take is known. Whatever you buy in the stores, where you pay, when you go to the toilet, when you go to sleep, everything is known, because that little screen is constantly with you and you use it for everything. And that's how they have also done it, that they have already profiled us almost completely. And now they want to take us to a place where they want to make a future or a reality where everything is constantly controlled, guided in a certain way, and everybody is put into certain limits, right? And then the feminine energy is completely different, because the masculine energy is very grounded, very realistic. The science, everything is based on that, right? But just like in the movie Harry Potter, the feminine energy or the living beings, they're like wizards. They have magic and they have all kinds of psychic skills and knowing skills, and they are uncontrollable in that way, and they awaken like many do these days. But that for Matrix all is not so good, so to say. So Yaoldebath wanted to create a world which was just like him, where there is no magic, there is no love, where there is just, he has to build everything on outside. The only way that he can feel something inside is from the outside. Because if you don't have a soul, you don't have the good feelings inside. You don't have peace, you don't have love, you don't have joy, you have none of it. Now he created the Archon minds, and what did he do then? He started going from a planet to planet. See, when a living being is created who has a soul, it is created together with the planet, with the ecosystem. Each cosmic race has a home, right? We are here on planet Earth, we people, living beings, masculine and feminine beings with a soul. And we are created together with the ecosystem. When we come and land on this planet through the birth, then after we are born, our placenta should be taken and be buried inside the earth. And then the earth knows that we have landed, and it's like we start creating life together. We are all here together, and we have this connection, and we have all our assignments, and we are just one. But they don't have that. The Yaoldebath and his Archon minds and all of that, they didn't have a place, they didn't have a planet, they didn't have a home, they didn't have anybody else who they would be one with, because they were born out of a creation that was not normal, so to say, in the universe. And then they started going from a planet to planet. And what they started to do is they started convincing the civilizations on that planet to also disconnect from the source, to disconnect from the feminine energy. And what I've been shown that they did is they convinced beings, for example, in our planet, they convinced men to give up their souls. Because a soul has really good parts, but the part that is really hard for men and women to handle is pain. A soul feels. It also feels love, but it also feels pain. It feels fear. It has all kinds of feelings. And now, I don't know if you've noticed that, but I've been working as a therapist for 12 years already, and men have a really hard time handling emotional pain. So that's where the giving up the souls or selling of the souls started. And the way Yaoldebath did it is like, give me your soul and I will give you something else. I will give you power, and I will give you this, and I will give you that. But the one who gave up the soul didn't know that by giving up the soul and losing the feeling of pain, he would lose also the feeling of everything else. Joy, happiness, love, fulfillment. He would forever feel empty inside. And that's how it started to, they started to create the outside things. The more houses I have, the more cars I have, the more jewelry I have, the more things I have, the more people I have. Because only the outside things can make them feel good. They have nothing inside to make them feel good. They don't have the part of the nervous system that is calm, that is happy, that is joyous, that is playful. The feminine part of the nervous system is lacking there. They only have a constant drive, a constant ambition, a constant agitation, a fear, all of that. And now, then when they came to planets and started convincing slowly, one by one maybe, men to give away their souls. And then if you take away the men of the planet, then women have all kinds of gifts, but the men are the providers and the protectors. The women are the nurturer and the creators, the feminine beings. And that is, and then that is really, really easy to access the women, the feminine beings, and start taking them down also, because the men who are supposed to protect them and the children, they have no feelings anymore. They have no knowing what's right or wrong anymore. And they start to do things that harm their loved ones. If they lose this soul, they cannot feel others anymore. So they start to think only about themselves. They start to feel the emptiness that is inside. They start to cheat, they start to be greedy, they start to be too ambitious, they want to get things outside, they become restless, there is no grounding anymore. Everything harmonious disappears for them. And this is how I have been shown how the whole story in this universe started, by giving up your soul. So you disconnect from the feminine energy of the source. Now, there are many, many others who tell the story that there are organic races and there are unorganic races. And unorganic race is somebody who has disconnected themselves from the source. Now, it happened on Earth, but before it happened on Earth, it happened also on other planets. And one of the stories that is really closely connected to us is the Annunakis. Because the Annunakis were the ones who also disconnected from the source. Originally, they were also an organic race. They had the masculine and feminine energies in balance. And then they were also convinced by Yaoldebath to disconnect from the source and take down the feminine energy, give up the feminine energy, so everything would be logical, everything would be controlled, everything would be the way, it was presented by Yaoldebath that this would be ideal. But what happened is, like I said then, the life does not restore itself then anymore. And death becomes imminent. Everything is just drained, but there is no restoration. I don't know if you know this, but people with souls do not age like people do now. And I'm carrying this cross, which is not the cross of Jehovah or the Christianity. When I was given this symbol and asked to bring it back to Earth, this is the cross from the source. And here are all energies from 4 directions. They're flowing equally into one another. So there is constant restoration and constant balance. There is no aging, there is no death. There is transformation. People can end that life and go to another place and so on. But it happens completely differently. Nobody would die when they reach 100 years of living. Yeah, approximately, or even sooner. Now, I will tell you about this cross a little bit more another time, but basically that is what happened. Death started happening. And Annunakis also, what they did is they completely depleted all the resources on their own planet, and basically they were in the verge of extinction. Now, what they had to do then is they had to go to other planets to find the resources that they were missing to continue life on their own planet, right? So they became parasites. You become parasitic when you cannot refill yourself anymore. You become parasitic when you cannot feel love anymore. You become parasitic when you cannot maintain life on your own and have to depend on somebody else. And all the civilizations and the planets and the cosmic races who were connected to the source, they had a harmonious ecosystem and the circle of life where everything that was used was also constantly restored. If I have a soul, then I can feel others. I can feel what I do to another. I can feel what I do to myself. I can feel what I do to the nature. I can feel what I do to the animals. And that we have lost in this world, in Earth. The same way we have also become parasitic. We look how we are in our relationships. So Annunakis came and started digging up resources in our planet to maintain their own planet. So become a parasite. You give up something that is natural to you, and then you become a parasite, and then you have to go and take over other planets. And of course it's perfect because they don't have a soul. They don't care about anybody anymore. They just want to maintain their own life. And that is how Yaoldebath and all his descendants are. They don't care about anybody else. They don't feel anybody else. They are just focused on maintaining their own life, their own creation, and that is what is most important to them. Now, but Annunakis, how do they come here and how do they dig up the resources? They need to come up with a plan. And then the next story, which is really big and what started to happen and what is in my book, is the story of Adam and Eve. Now, Adam is not the first man. Just like the Bible is not the story of how this universe was made and of the source. The Bible is the story of how Jehovah or Demiurge Yaoldebath took over earth and how he created the matrix here. See, there is this one rule, well, there are two rules, but both of them are equally important. One is the truth has to be out there, but nobody has said how the truth has to be out there. And the second rule is you cannot invade anybody's free will. And so they don't invade our free will, they give us an offer which we accept. And then that is how you give your hand to the evil, basically. But the Bible then is the story how Matrix was created on this earth. And it starts with the creation of Adam and Eve. But Adam had also first wife, and she was called Lilith, right? Now, Adam was actually created by the Annunakis, and he is a copy of a person, a being with a soul on this planet, this cosmic race, but he doesn't have a soul. He's what I call them clones. The book is called The Cloniverse, so I call them clones. And they are biorobots. Imagine them as AIs, but with bodies. They can walk around and they can do things. But there were two reasons why those beings were created. First, of course, was that they were created because the Anunnakis needed a workforce to start digging up resources from our planet. The gold and all kind of other rare metals. They're still doing it in ways here. And the other thing was that Archon minds didn't have bodies. They wanted bodies to use and roam around in this world and do all kinds of things. So there was like two reasons why these specific beings were created. Now, what happened with Adam and Lilith? And I hope you understand that the story is like it shows what happened, but not in a way that only one man was created. They created a whole bunch of men who were clones, biorobots. Let's say we call them Adam, and they released them among our people. Now, what did they do with the clones? They made the clones really appeasing on the outside. They were made beautiful, they were made muscular, because they were empty inside. That meant you had to make them outside so attractive that it would trigger something inside our brains that we lose our grounding, we lose our common sense, we lose our intuition. It's like it's a beauty that you haven't seen before. Now, a being with a soul actually is not that beautiful outside in a way that this beauty is presented in this world. They were made like the Kens and Barbies of this world. But from a soulless being, the beauty comes from inside. How peaceful they are, how calm, how friendly, how resourceful, thoughtful, and all of those things. Beauty was made in a really different way. It wasn't just in an appearance. But for a soul, because they are empty inside, they have to, for the clone, they had to cover it up. So they were made really, really, really beautiful outside. Like I said, the Kens and Barbies of this world. And the men were tall, the men were really muscular, the men had big penises. It was also like an immense sexual attraction that started to happen, which would completely take over the rational mind. So a lot of men like that were released into this earth, and they started connecting with the women. And they started to have children with these women. And this is what I call now, in these days, that happens is the dopamine love. The dopamine love lasts only a certain amount of time. I feel it is like a black magic. Something takes you over, but then when the dopamine wears out and calms down, then you suddenly start to see that, wow, this man or this woman is not anything that I thought he would be, because they present like a good outside look, a story, how they talk, everything is made that way to seduce you. But then what's actually going on inside truly is like there's nothing in there backing up that story, so to say. So they cannot hide who they truly are, not for a long time, maybe a couple of years, but then it wears out. And then we start to awaken and we see, wow, what has happened? But by that time, many women had had children with these men already. And from that, a completely new race was born in this world, and which today is called the Jewish people, the Jewish race. You know also from the Bible that they are the chosen people from Jehovah or the Yaoldebath, the demiurge, the Satan. And you can see from the Bible also how they don't have a home, they don't have a country, you know that. Then what else is that they're Jewish people, like for everybody else, your nationality comes from your father's side, usually. But from Jewish people, it comes from the mother's side. Why is that? Because Adam didn't have a nationality, he didn't have a home, he didn't have anything, because he was an artificial being placed here. But then Lilith was a being, or Lilith, the live women with soul. They were inhabitants of this earth. So the Jews are hybrids between living people with a soul and soulless beings. Now, hybrids, in a way, do not have to be actually bad. Not at all. I shall explain that a little bit later in another episode, but I just make you an example that Harry Potter is the story of what actually happened in this world. Voldemort is the half-blooded prince, the same as Yaoldebath or the Satan. And Hermione is a mix between a hybrid and the wizard, between the muggle and the wizard. The muggles are the soulless beings, and wizards are the beings with the soul, the inhabitants, the true inhabitants of this earth. And you can see that Hermione is extremely talented. And the same way is with hybrid beings. You can see that you cannot say that Jews are stupid. You cannot say. They are extremely smart. But what was done to them to make sure absolutely that they go into the way of the evil, not in the way of the good, because they have a potential for both, is we have two energetic channels. One runs up the spine, that is our father channel, and the other channel comes down from the front, and that is our mother channel. Now, if you do the circumcision for a baby, and that is in the age of what, a few weeks, very, very young, a few days, I can't remember what it is, then it cuts the mother channel. It cuts the connection in the heart. It alters the brain. So all the Jewish men, it's made sure that they don't have a connection to the soul, to love, to compassion, to empathy. That is a ritual, what they do. And the women, they are raised in a very masculine way there, because men are dominant in the family. They are the heads of the family. The women and Jewish women have to go to the military, and so on and on. So it's made sure that this nationality does not have any kind of how do you say, like the soul, the love, or whatever. And as you can also see, the Jews are the rulers of the matrix. They have taken over the banking system, the medical system. They are in many places. You can see what is happening with Israel all the time. It's a complete craziness that is going on. So if we look at the story in that way, then you can also understand that what was going on with Hitler and the Jews in World War II is not the story that has been presented to us. I actually covered that story in the book here also, what Hitler wanted to do truly and who Hitler was. And we're going to go into that too in another episode. But anyway, so going back to the Jews. So there were people or a new race born out of the union from living live women with souls and artificial cloned biological biorobot men. And then at one point it came out what was happening. So basically these women left. They left. They didn't want this union anymore. The story went out that this is what's happening on this earth. They were known how those men are, how they look like, etc. So on, because they basically behaved completely different as a man would who is a living being. And then they needed another plan. Thus, Eve was created. Now, Eve is not a woman, and a man, the name man actually goes for the clone. All the short from the M-M-A-N is the clones. Hugh, man, woo, man. And Eve was a man with a womb, basically. Now, clone women are completely different. For example, they don't have breast milk, they don't have breasts, they don't have the fat around the hips, they don't have hips like women have. They are not these voluptuous women as women should be, but in their body-wise they look more like men. And that has also been presented now in this world as the beauty model, the beauty version of how everybody should be. Like, for example, for a living live woman, it's really important that their belly stands out and that there is a little bit of fat on top of the belly, because it shows the size of the uterus. If it sticks out a bit or a little bit more, it shows how much creation power you have. And in the old days, before the clones came, that was known to men, and men would want to have a woman who had a more stronger, more bigger belly. I'm not talking about people being fat. That is a completely different story, because we are still supposed to be healthy. But a feminine body was different from what the feminine body that is presented to us now in these days. If you go into museums and look at the old paintings, for example, by Rubens, then you see that the women look completely different. And we don't, in any of these pictures, we don't have the Kens and the Barbies of this world. The men, yes, they're muscular, they are fit, good, but the women are more voluptuous. And that is the story of why, because real women look completely different than from these men with wombs, woo man. And now Adam and Eve then became also, so to say, new race. They were the ancestors of a new race, the clones. And as you remember, their children were Cain and Abel. And look what happened with Cain and Abel. The story is also there. It's written out in my book, as a brother kills a brother. And that is not okay. And look at the story again, how Cain kills Abel because of what? Because of jealousy, because he's again, and it's really to that God, because they both had to give some kind of an offering, and his offering was not accepted. So out of that envy, he kills his own brother. And then he goes back to the parents, and parents ask, where is your brother? And he says, am I my brother's keeper? Yes, we should all be our brothers and sisters' keepers, because we, living beings, are all one. But Cain and Abel did not have that. And that is also why laws were created. That is why fear was massively created. That is where religion is created, because the clones or the beings, they have to obey to someone. They have to obey somebody outside. They don't have the compass of good and evil, wrong and right inside of them. That comes from the soul. That comes from the heart consciousness. They are lacking that. Now, Adam and Eve, as you remember, lived in the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is not a paradise. It is an artificial, an artificial environment, and the children of the Satan were kept there until the snake appears in the story of the Bible. Now, a snake was not Satan as it is presented, because everything is the matrix is turned exactly upside down. If you want to know who is good and who is bad, turn the stories upside down. Snake is the representative of the source, of the feminine energy of the source, or Lilith. Snakes are not bad. It's really funny that I just went to see, I went to the movies with my smallest child. Really don't like to go to the movies, but somehow she wanted to see a cartoon, and it is the last cartoon, Zootopia. I think here it's called Zootropolis. And here is a story of the snakes. I would say I would not recommend to go watch it, because your nervous system goes into a complete haywire, because the slides are just switching like every other second. And my child also said, let's go away and so on. But I stayed. I wanted to see it until then. That it was also really well presented how the snakes were bad in that movie. That snakes, I don't know, killed somebody and so on. But then the truth came out that in this movie, the lynxes are bad, and they switch the story, they lie to everybody, and they are constantly taking over parts of Zootropolis or Zootopia. And this reminded me so much of that story, that snakes are made bad, but snakes are actually so smart. Snakes are the transformers. Snakes bring the wisdom. We just had a snake year, we're now having it. It's been an amazing year. And I was shown that Lilith has the order of the black snake. So Lilith is just a representative of this living, live being, women with feminine beings with a soul. Actually, I cannot say women, I can say only feminine beings, because woman is a man with a womb or a clone. And remember, all these living, live feminine beings were made bad. They were made demons. Lilith is called a demon now, which she is not. She just didn't comply with those soulless beings, with Satan, with Archon minds and so on. They stood up, so to say. And now they were made demons, and then they started suppressing divine feminine beings heavily. And that has been going on in the last centuries. The Inquisitions, the witch hunts, the witch trials, the burning of the witches and all that. They're just divine feminine beings with a soul who were tortured and taken out, so to say. But we are awakening now again, that is for sure. Now, Lilith then comes into that, into the Garden of Eden and tell that story to Adam and Eve, what is truly going on, the good and the evil, that look where you're living. And because Eve, again, a kind of a feminine being, doesn't obey his ruler, then they are cast out of the Garden of Eden into general matrix. And then they have to live their life here. Now, I think of it this way, that Yaoldebath, or Satan, wants that everybody worships him, everybody listens to him, everybody just does exactly what he says. And now his own children, his own beings that he created, developed another consciousness. They developed also their own consciousness, although they don't have a heart, but they have a consciousness. And they kind of woke up in a certain way and saying, oh, so this is what's happening. So they also didn't obey him anymore. So they were cast out, and that means in a way that they were left on their own. But now they were thrown into the general matrix, into the place together with all the other people here. They have a consciousness on their own, as I said. they started creating things here. They started creating life here. They started creating businesses here. They started creating everything together with the Jewish people, who are also now, they are half beings, but remember, their soul connection, their mother connection is cut out. And if you look at what has started happening on planet Earth at one point is remember that there started coming like this new money. If you look at old movies, you can see that they call the new riches, and nobody wanted to connect with them. Nobody wanted to accept them to the society. Nobody wanted to do business with them, but they were really smart, especially in business. So they started manipulating everything in the way that the original people of the planet didn't have a choice. They would come and take over everything. Now, how did they create their own monetary system? We had a different monetary system, which was gold and silver coins. You can also see that from the movies. And when the soulless beings came, crime started to happen. Things started being stolen. And it's all a part of a plan that they created. So I create crime, and if there's crime, you're going to need protection. Then I'm going to create a bank where you can bring your gold and your silver coins, and I say I'm going to hold them there for you, so nobody can steal them from your home. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you papers, which is like an IOU. And you have the same amount of, you have a certain amount of papers for the amount of gold and silver coins that you put in the bank. And now you don't have to take your silver and your gold out of the bank, but if you have to pay someone, you give that paper to that person. And then in the end of the month or end of the week, that person comes, gives the papers, and the silver and gold coins are put from your account to his bank account. And you are only switching papers all the time. Now, if you look at, for example, the English pound, then it's not money. It's all also written on that. It is a promissory note. It is a promise to pay. So whenever I truly want, I can take that paper and I can go and take my gold and silver out. But eventually, as life went by, all the gold and the silver was stolen by the soulless system. And you were left only with paper money that is nothing anymore. It's not backed up by anything. And that's what was before. The gold and the silver were backing up the paper money. There was only enough paper money going around as much as there was gold and silver. But then they stole the gold and silver and just gave out the papers and started printing and printing more papers. And basically, as you can see, the whole financial system, we can say it's collapsed. It's a complete disaster. And everything that belonged to the people was taken away, was stolen. So you can see what has been going on in this planet, how everything started to develop when the soulless beings came. They started taking over our world, and they started creating their own world here. Until the year of 2012, Yaoldebath and his Archon minds were all governing the soulless beings on the planet. They had like an upper hierarchy, a connection with them. Why did the Mayan calendar predict that in 2012 the world would end? Because Yaoldebath's reign ended. On the cosmic level, they decided that parasitic energy is going to be ended. That, let's say, trial in the universe, it's done. And Yaoldebath, so to say, was taken off from his position. Maybe he was taken back to the source, blended again to the source, whatever the way they do with that creation. But all of his creation still roams around in the world. the Jewish people, the clones, the beings from the other planets who have lost their liveliness, who became unorganic, the Annunakis and so on. Everything is still there, so to say. Now, David Icke has written about the Archon minds, Archon beings. There are the spiders there are octopuses there are all kinds of beings there. I have seen them myself, I can see them myself, I can see if they are attached to a person's energy body somewhere. It's a very interesting world. At one point I started seeing them when my sight, so to say, opened up. And now what we're going to go through here is a kind of cleanse. Why this knowledge is brought back to people right now is because I have to bring this knowledge back, because we have to know what goes on in this world. And you cannot live together at the same place with the soulless being and the soulless being with the soul, and the soulless being cannot have the same place together. Because the soulless being has a constant emptiness inside, they will only keep using up everything. But our planet cannot stand that. So it is time that everything gets cleansed, everything gets redone. The old systems are falling apart, the matrix will be falling apart, everything is about to start changing. And that is what we need to know. Why is this all happening? There is already a lot of death happening on this planet. A lot of diseases after the COVID, with a lot of vaccinations and stuff. But yes, the COVID is done by the evil side, but there is also another story in the back here, because they have to collect their own people. They have to take out their creation. They have to stop their creation from having more and more children. They have to keep them from reproducing constantly. This time has ended. Everything is over. And now it is the part where the old system collapses. The new things start to come up. Life slowly starts to return to the place how it was supposed to be for people. People would live in small communities. They would live together with each other. We didn't have rulers in the same way as we have now. But with the stories of the kings and queens and the pharaohs, I also write about that in my book, and I will get into that later in the podcast episodes for sure too. We didn't have kings and queens like Matrix presents us. We had spiritual mothers and fathers. They were like the queen bees for those people, for that country, and their role was to serve the people, not to govern the people. And when they served them, they gave them knowledge, they helped them, they guided them. Yes, they would. People could go to them with all kinds of questions and things, but they were servers and not rulers. And then the Matrix made all the kings the rulers, and they became parasites in that way. But I will get into that part also later. And I want to discuss in the next podcast episode deeper religion. We are going to look at different religions a little bit. We are going to look at the Vatican. We are going to look at the soulless beings, how their hierarchy goes in this world, on this planet, because they start to descend in a way that the Pope is, they said this, he's the God's representative on earth. Well, the God is the Yaoldebath or the Emerge. It's the Satan's representative on the earth. And then from the Vatican comes England. And England is the place where the clones took over first. Originally in UK or in that land, there lived also the people from the source, the beings who were connected to the nature. The Druids, the Scottish people, they had their own languages, they had their own rituals, so many things. I'm going to explain also those things all in a deeper way. And then from England comes America. we're going to have to go deeper into the topic, but America is a complete clone country, a clone world. Soulless beings mostly. All the beings who have a soul who move to America are people from the original nations, Italy, Ireland, Scotland. From all those places, people were sent there as prisoners or were offered, I don't know, a new future or something like that. But as you remember, in the time when England, where there were a lot of wars and England was colonizing many places, so to say, then America was also a colonial land. And America originally belonged to the Native Americans. That is their land. And they were killed. They were killed. Their land was taken. And the land was given to the clones. The same thing as was done in England, what was done in America, what was done in Australia. Australia is another country that is full of clones, clone people, because Australia was a country for Aborigines. They were the original nature people there. I'm going to go deeper into that in the next episode. Africa has been taken over. The black people are not soulless beings. They are very, very connected to the earth. They have their own gods. They're very intuitive. They have their own rituals. And then they were taken over by the English during the times of war, taken to other places as slaves. So Matrix has done a lot here. But yes, I will then dive deeper next time into religion, into the Pope, into the English, into the Americans, and all of that. Thank you for watching this episode. Really happy if you want to order my book and read more about it. I'll release approximately one episode every 2 weeks of the podcast, and I'm just taking the book from the start and explaining it in a deeper way, because the book is already over 400 pages. I cover so many topics here, and unfortunately I can cover some topics only this much, and that is why in the podcast I want to go deeper into covering those topics and explaining more. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Hit the subscribe button, and if you like what you're hearing, also please share this podcast.